Imagine this. A 6-year-old boy darts behind a bush in the misty Great Smoky Mountains, his red shirt flashing against the green foliage, heart pounding with excitement from a game of hide and seek. In seconds, his giggles fade into absolute silence, the dense forest closing in like a living entity, and he's gone vanished without a trace. This isn't fiction. It's the chilling start to one of the most baffling disappearances in American history. On June 14, 1969, the Martin family arrived at Spencefield, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a vast wilderness spanning Tennessee and North Carolina, known for its ancient ridges shrouded in perpetual fog. William Martin, an architect from Knoxville, brought his 2 sons, 9-year-old Douglas and 6-year-old Dennis, along with his father Clyde, for what was meant to be a simple Father's Day weekend hike. They joined another family group, the atmosphere light with laughter as the children played in the open meadow, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. Spencefield, a high-elevation bald with sweeping views, felt isolated even then, miles from the nearest road, where the air carried the scent of wildflowers mixed with the damp earth. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass, the kids hatched a plan. Dennis, Douglas, and 2 other boys would circle around through the woods to sneak up on the adults. The older boys burst out from one side, startling the group with shouts and grins. But Dennis, who had peeled off in a different direction, just 50 feet away, didn't appear. At first, it was dismissed as part of the game. Maybe he was still hiding, giggling behind a tree. William called out his name, the sound echoing faintly against the hills, but only the rustle of leaves answered. Minutes ticked by, the light-hearted mood shifting to unease as the fathers began searching the immediate area, pushing through thick underbrush that scratched at their skin. What would you do in that moment, realizing your child might not be playing anymore? The search intensified. Clyde Martin hiked down to Cades Cove to alert park rangers, a grueling several-mile trek through rugged terrain. By evening, rangers arrived, combing the area with flashlights that pierced the growing darkness, their beams dancing like ghosts among the trees. Dennis was described as a sturdy boy, 4 feet tall, 55 pounds, with dark brown hair and a bright red t-shirt that should have stood out against the greenery. He wore green shorts, Oxford shoes, and no jacket ill-equipped for the chilly mountain nights that could drop to freezing. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and a heavy fog rolled in, blanketing the landscape in an impenetrable haze. Searchers called his name into the void, their voices swallowed by the vastness, each unanswered echo amplifying the isolation. Why hadn't he responded? Was he hurt, or something more sinister at play? The next day, June 15th, the operation escalated. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their rotors chopping through the air, while volunteers and rangers fanned out in grid patterns. But then, the skies opened. Torrential rains pounded the mountains for days, turning trails into muddy rivers and erasing any potential tracks. The deluge was relentless, flooding creeks and making the search treacherous, as if the park itself was conspiring to hide its secrets. Amid the chaos, strange reports began to surface. A family hiking miles away in a different section of the park claimed they heard an unearthly scream, piercing and desperate, unlike any animal they'd known. Then, they spotted a rough-looking man, hairy and unkempt, dodging through the trees while carrying something red over his shoulder. Was this a coincidence? Or a glimpse of the unthinkable? Authorities dismissed it. The location was too far, over 7 miles as the crow flies, through impenetrable wilderness. But in such remote expanses, where distances deceive and sounds carry oddly, could it have been connected? The search grew to unprecedented scale. By midweek, over 1,000 people were involved, including FBI agents and even Special Forces Green Berets from nearby Fort Bragg. Why the military? Rumors swirled, perhaps due to the park's proximity to sensitive areas, or something classified. The soldiers moved in silent, disciplined formations, their presence adding an air of official gravity to the desperation. Yet, despite thermal imaging, dogs, and exhaustive sweeps, not a single definitive clue emerged. No clothing, no footprints that matched, nothing. One potential lead, a child's shoe print found near a stream, but it couldn't be confirmed as Dennis's. The dogs, usually reliable, lost sense abruptly, as if the trail vanished into thin air. Weeks dragged on, the family clinging to hope amid the creeping dread, but the park's 500,000 acres of dense forest, cliffs, and hidden caves seemed to mock their efforts. Dennis's mother stayed home, preparing his favorite meals in case he returned, while his father refused to leave the mountains. The media frenzy built, headlines screaming about the boy lost in the wild. But behind the scenes, tensions rose, conflicting reports, jurisdictional squabbles. And then, another layer of mystery. Why did the Green Berets reportedly find signs of disturbance, but share little? Some theorize they were there for more than search and rescue, perhaps testing equipment or covering something up. But these are just theories, whispers in the investigative community. As the search wound down after 2 months, with no body or evidence, the case slipped into the realm of the unexplained. Dennis Martin was declared missing, presumed dead, but without closure. The questions lingered like the perpetual mist. What if he didn't just wander off? What if something or someone lured him deeper into the woods? Picture the silence after the rain, the empty meadow where laughter once echoed, now heavy with absence. Would you venture into those same trails, knowing what might lurk unseen? This case, haunting in its simplicity, is part of a larger pattern documented in the Missing 411 series by researcher David Paulides. The Dennis Martin case left us with a boy vanishing in broad daylight, amid dozens of witnesses, with no tracks, no cries, and no answers. But what if this wasn't an isolated incident? What if the same eerie patterns, sudden disappearance, bizarre weather shifts, vanished scents, and impossible recoveries, repeated across America's most iconic national parks? Let's shift our gaze westward to Yosemite National Park, California, where granite walls rise thousands of feet and ancient sequoias stand like silent sentinels. In this vast 1,200 square mile wilderness, the numbers are staggering. More documented disappearances than almost any other park in the country. One of the earliest and most unsettling cases occurred in 1991. A young man named Keith Parkin, 24 years old, arrived at Yosemite with friends for a weekend of climbing and hiking. He was fit, experienced, and familiar with the park's trails. On the morning of July 28th, he set out alone on a popular day hike to the base of Half Dome, telling his companions he'd be back by early afternoon. The sun was high, the sky clear, and the trail was busy with other hikers. He never returned. His friends waited and grew concerned and terrified. Rangers were alerted by dusk. A massive search began, dogs, helicopters, climbers rappelling into gullies. But Keith had vanished as if the earth had simply swallowed him. Days later, a single clue emerged. A single hiking boot, found lying alone on a rocky ledge far from the main trail, with no signs of struggle. The boot was his, but the other shoe was never located. The terrain there was steep, but not impossible. Why would he leave one boot behind? And why did the search dogs, brought in to follow his scent, simply stop at the edge of a sheer drop, refusing to go further, as if something had ended the trail right there? The official conclusion: he likely fell into a crevasse or off a cliff. But no body was ever found. No blood, no torn clothing. Just one boot, left like a marker. Yosemite's granite is riddled with deep fissures, narrow slots, and hidden caves that drop hundreds of feet. Some are so narrow that a person could fall in and never be seen from above. But even in those cases, something is usually found: clothing, gear, a scream echoing back. Keith's case had none of that. Just silence. And it wasn't the only one. In 1998, a 14-year-old girl named Stacy Harris disappeared during a family backpacking trip near Sunrise High Sierra Camp. She stepped away from the group to take photographs at a nearby lake, only 100 yards from the others. Her father heard her camera shutter click once, then twice, then nothing. She never returned to the campsite. Searchers scoured the area for weeks. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no clothing. Just the lake, still and glassy, reflecting the towering peaks. The official report again suggested an accidental fall or drowning. But the water was shallow near the shore, and divers found no trace. Her camera was never recovered either. What happened in those few seconds between the last shutter click and the silence? Would you let your child wander that far, knowing how fast the wilderness can turn? The disappearances continued. In 2005, a 32-year-old man named Bart Schleyer vanished while backpacking in the remote northeast corner of the park. He was an experienced outdoorsman, carrying a satellite phone. He made contact with rangers on the evening of July 15th, saying he was fine and would check in the next day. He never did. His tent was found intact, food untouched, sleeping bag unused. His boots were missing, but the rest of his gear remained. Search teams found one of his socks inside, outdraped over a branch, like it had been placed there deliberately. No other trace. No blood, no footprints, no sign of animal attack. Just a single sock, hanging like a question mark. The park's official stance remained the same. Likely a fall, or lost and succumbed to exposure. But the patterns were growing harder to ignore. People vanishing in good weather, in places they knew, often in the company of others. Canine units losing scent trails abruptly. Weather turning violent soon after. And bodies, if ever found, often in areas already searched, sometimes miles away, sometimes in places that made no sense. In 2011, a 51-year-old woman named Jared Atadiro disappeared near the Big Thompson River in Rocky Mountain National Park. Another missing. 411 case, but the body of a young boy was later found in Yosemite in 2003. A child who vanished in 1991, whose remains appeared in a location that had been searched repeatedly. The remains were found high on a ridge, in a spot no child could have reached alone. No explanation was ever given for how they got there. The Park Service has never officially acknowledged any connection between these cases. They maintain that each disappearance is separate, tragic, but explainable. Yet researcher David Paulides compiled over 1,400 such cases across North America, many in national parks, and found consistent anomalies. People disappearing in clusters, often near boulder fields, water, or berry patches. Many were children or the elderly. Many were found, when found at all, in places that defied logic. And in Yosemite, the disappearances kept happening. In 2016, a 14-year-old boy named Dior Kunz Jr. vanished while camping with his parents in the remote Idaho section of the Salmon Shali National Forest, but similar patterns echoed back to Yosemite's own unsolved cases. The question grows heavier with each incident. Is it simply the danger of the wilderness? Or is there something else at work, something that watches, waits, and chooses its moment? Yosemite is beautiful, majestic, almost spiritual. But beneath the postcard views lies a shadow that has claimed too many. And the next case would push the mystery even deeper into a place where even the park rangers whispered about things they couldn't explain. What if the wilderness isn't as empty as we think? And what happens when the next person steps off the trail, camera in hand, just to capture one more shot? The cases in Yosemite left us with people vanishing without a trace, boots left behind like deliberate markers, socks draped on branches, and trails that simply ended. But what if the wilderness itself isn't the only thing watching? What if something or someone has been seen moving through these same forests, silent, deliberate, and unervingly human-like? Across the missing 411 cases, a disturbing subset of reports keep surfacing. Eyewitness accounts of large, upright figures observed near the time or place of a disappearance. They're not described as animals. They're described as something else entirely. In 1997, a group of hikers in the remote backcountry of Yosemite's northerness were setting up camp near dusk when one of them noticed movement along the ridgeline above. A tall, dark silhouette stood motionless against the fading sky, broad-shouldered, long-armed, and clearly bipedal. It watched them for several seconds, then turned and walked away, not with the loping gait of a bear, but with a smooth, almost human stride. The hikers were too far away to see detail, but they all agreed on one thing. It was too large, too upright, and too silent to be a person. They didn't report it to rangers at the time, afraid of sounding ridiculous. But years later, one of them would tell investigators it had been carrying something over its shoulder, something the size of a child. Coincidence or a pattern? In 2008, a family camping in Sequoia National Park, another missing 411 hotspot, reported a similar sighting. Their 2 young daughters had wandered just 20 yards from the tent to look at fireflies. The parents heard a low, guttural sound, almost like a grunt coming from the trees. They rushed over, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a massive, dark figure, at least 7 feet tall, covered in thick hair. It didn't move like a bear. It stood perfectly still, arms at its sides, staring directly at them. The father shouted, and the figure turned and walked away again with a steady, upright gait. The children were unharmed, but they were trembling. They said the thing had been watching them the entire time. The parents never saw what happened to the girls in those few minutes alone. They never wanted to know. Would you let your children out of sight after hearing a sound like that? These sightings aren't isolated. They appear in clusters, often near water, boulder fields, or berry patches. Exactly the same locations where people vanish in missing 411 cases. In 2011, near the Oregon Caves National Monument, a man searching for his missing brother reported seeing a tall, hairy figure carrying what looked like a small backpack. He followed it briefly, but it vanished into the undergrowth without a sound. His brother was never found. No tracks, no blood, just the memory of that figure moving with purpose. Park rangers have heard these stories for decades. Some dismiss them as misidentified bears or pranksters. Others off the record admit the descriptions don't match any known animal. And then there are the stranger reports. In 1980, a woman hiking alone in the Great Smoky Mountains claimed she saw a large, dark figure standing behind a tree, watching her. It had a face that was almost human to human. She ran. When she later described it to rangers, they listened quietly, then asked her not to speak about it publicly. She never heard back. Why would they ask her to stay silent? What do they know that we don't? In 2015, a group of campers in the Cascade Mountains of Washington state heard something large moving through the forest at night. Heavy footsteps, branches snapping, but no animal sounds. Then a low, almost whispered voice, human-like, but unintelligible, came from the darkness. The campers froze. The voice stopped. Minutes later, they heard it again closer. They packed up and left before dawn. The next morning, rangers found their campsite abandoned, but one tent was unzipped from the outside. No one was hurt. But the question lingers: who or what was speaking? These predator-like sightings share common threads with the disappearances: sudden appearance, unnatural silence, and an eerie sense of intent. They don't attack in the open. They watch. They wait. They move in the shadows. And when they're gone, so is someone else. Is it possible that something intelligent, something that understands camouflage, timing, and fear, has learned to exploit the wilderness? Or are these sightings simply misidentifications amplified by panic and isolation? The official stance remains clear. No credible evidence of any unknown creature or predator. But the reports keep coming, and the disappearances keep happening. Now imagine stepping into those same woods, hearing a branch snap behind you, turning to see nothing but feeling eyes on your back. Would you keep walking, or would you run? Because if these figures are real, they're not just watching the lost. They're watching us all. And the next case would take us even deeper into a disappearance that defied every rule of time, distance, and logic. The predator-like sightings left us with figures that watch from the shadows, move with purpose, and vanish without a trace, always near the places where people disappear. But if something is out there, surely the people who know these parks best would have seen it too. Park rangers, men and women who spend years walking the same trails, sleeping under the same stars, have witnessed things they rarely speak about publicly. Their stories, shared quietly over campfires or in off-the-record interviews, carry a weight that no outsider can dismiss. In 2003, a seasoned Yosemite ranger, who had worked the backcountry for over 2 decades, responded to a missing hiker alert near the Merced River. He and his partner searched for days, covering terrain they knew like their own backyards. On the 3rd night, while camped alone in a small meadow, he heard footsteps circling his tent. Heavy, deliberate steps, too heavy for a deer, too precise for a bear. He called out. The footsteps stopped. Then they started again, closer. He unzipped the tent flap, flashlight ready. Nothing, just the darkness and the sound of the river far below. The next morning, he found fresh tracks in the soft earth, large, human-like footprints, but with an odd, elongated shape. He photographed them, then buried the photos in his personal files. He never reported them. When asked why, he said simply, "They don't want us to talk about it." Who is they? Another ranger, stationed in the Great Smoky Mountains, recounted a 1998 incident near Clingman's Dome. A child had gone missing during a school field trip similar to Dennis Martin, only a few miles away. The ranger was part of the initial search team. Late that night, while sweeping a ridge with a flashlight, he saw a figure standing motionless about 50 yards away. It was tall, dark, and upright. He swept the beam across it. The figure didn't flinch. It just stared back. When he radioed for backup, the figure turned and walked into the fog. He followed for a moment, then lost it. The next day, the child was found alive, disoriented, and miles from where he should have been. The ranger asked the boy if he had seen anyone. The child nodded, wide-eyed. "A big man in the woods. He told me to follow him." The boy refused. The ranger never filed an official report. He told investigators years later, "I didn't want to lose my job." Why would a ranger fear losing his job over something he saw? What kind of pressure comes from above? In 2012, a former Glacier National Park ranger broke his silence in a private conversation with researcher David Paulides. He described a night in 2005 when he and 2 others were searching for a missing backpacker near Lake McDonald. Around 2 a.m., they heard a scream, high-pitched, almost childlike, but distorted, as if coming from underwater. The scream echoed across the lake, bouncing off the mountains. Then silence. They searched the shore for hours. No one was ever found. But the ranger said something else. The scream wasn't human. He had heard mountain lions, bears, elk, bugling nothing like this. He said it sounded like a recording being played back at the wrong speed. When they reported it to supervisors, they were told to drop it. No further investigation. No mention in the official file. He left the Park Service 2 years later. He couldn't stay in a place where the truth was buried. These rangers aren't conspiracy theorists. They're trained observers, taught to notice details, to trust their senses. Yet time after time, they describe the same thing. phenomena that don't fit the official narrative. Unexplained footprints, figures that watch and then disappear, sounds that don't belong to any known animal, and always the same instruction: don't talk about it. One former ranger from Sequoia National Park put it this way: we were told to explain everything as accidents. Falls, exposure, getting lost. But when you've been out there long enough, you realize some things can't be explained that way. He paused, then added, and when you start asking questions, they start watching you. Watching you. Just like the figures in the woods watch the hikers. Is it possible that the Park Service knows more than they admit? That there are protocols in place, unwritten rules for cases that fall outside the normal? Many rangers retire early, move away, or simply stop talking. But the ones who speak, even quietly, all say the same thing: the wilderness holds secrets. And some of those secrets are protected at the highest levels. What if the disappearances aren't random? What if someone or something is selecting people? And what if the rangers are being told to look the other way? The deeper we go, the more the picture darkens. Because the final case we'll examine may be the most impossible of all. A disappearance that broke every rule of time, distance, and reason. And it happened in a place where even the rangers won't go alone after dark. Would you step into those same shadows, knowing what they've seen? Or would you turn back before it's too late? We followed the trail from a boy vanishing in seconds at Spence Field, to hikers disappearing without trace in Yosemite's granite maze, to dark figures watching from the trees, to rangers who see things they're told to forget. Now we step back and look at the bigger picture. What if all these cases aren't separate tragedies? What if they're connected by a pattern so consistent it can no longer be dismissed as coincidence? Researcher David Paulides spent years compiling data on missing persons in national parks and wilderness areas. He found over 1,400 documented cases that share eerie similarities. Children and the elderly disappear at higher rates than their population would suggest. Many vanish within sight or sound of others. Dogs lose scent trails abruptly, as if the person simply ceased to exist. Weather changes dramatically soon after sudden storms, heavy fog, snow in summer. When bodies are found, they are often miles away, in places already searched, sometimes in impossible locations. Many are found with clothing removed or turned inside-out behavior that makes no sense in cold conditions. Footprints stop cold. Personal items appear arranged, as if placed deliberately. Paulides identified geographic clusters: Yosemite, the Great Smoky Mountains, the Cascades, the Rockies, and the Sierra Nevada. These are not the most visited parks. They are remote, rugged, and full of natural hazards, but also full of boulder fields, water sources, and berry patches. Again and again, people vanish near those features. Why? Another pattern. Many of the missing have German surnames. Not all, but far more than statistical chance would predict. Paulides has never claimed to know why. He simply presents the data and lets it speak. The National Park Service has never acknowledged these clusters. They maintain that most disappearances are explained by accident, exposure, or poor preparation. Yet their own records show cases that defy those explanations. Bodies found in trees, on ledges too high to reach. Children discovered miles from where they were last seen, with no memory of how they got there. Some return alive, disoriented, unable to explain the lost hours or days. And then there are the ones who never come back. What does this pattern tell us? Is it simply the danger of the wild amplified by statistics? Or is there something more deliberate at work? Something that knows how to exploit human behavior, how to choose its moment, how to erase evidence. Something that operates in the silence between the trees, in the fog that rolls in the darkness that falls faster than expected. We may never know the truth, but the numbers keep growing. Every year, new names are added to the list. Every year, families wait for answers that never come. And every year, people still step onto those trails drawn by beauty, by adventure, by the promise of something greater than themselves. The wilderness is vast. It is ancient. It is indifferent, but perhaps it is not entirely empty. Perhaps something looks back. Perhaps it has always looked back. So the next time you plan a hike, remember these names: Dennis Martin, Keith Parkin, Stacy Arris, Bart Schlayer, and hundreds more whose stories echo in the quiet places. Because the question is no longer whether these disappearances are connected. The question is what happens when you step off the marked path. Would you go further? Would you go alone? Would you go at all? If these stories unsettled you, if they made you think twice about the wild places we love, then share them. Like this video. Subscribe if you want to see more investigations into the unexplained. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever felt watched in the woods? Because the wilderness remembers. And it's still waiting.